There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over a suburban neighborhood late at night. Not silence. Silence is clean, honest. This is something else. It's the quiet of lawns too green, driveways too empty, and windows that glow with the pale blue flicker of televisions nobody is actually watching. It's the quiet of people who have agreed, without ever saying so, to pretend everything is fine. Marcus Webb had always loved that quiet. He moved to Delwood Drive on a Thursday in October, when the leaves were just beginning to turn and the air smelled like wood smoke and something almost sweet beneath it. He was 34 years old, recently divorced, recently relocated, and recently promoted. Three words that made his life sound like a series of clean transactions rather than the slow unraveling it had actually been. The house was a two-story colonial, white with gray shutters, a porch wide enough to sit on, though Marcus had never been the kind of man who sat on porches. The previous owners had left a hanging basket of dead ferns by the front door, and Marcus kept telling himself he would throw it away. He never did. It just hung there, dry and crumbling, shedding brown flakes onto the welcome mat like something that had given up long before he arrived. His sister Keisha helped him move in. She drove 2 hours from Atlanta with her minivan packed full of the boxes Marcus had shipped to her place after the divorce because he hadn't had anywhere else to send them. She didn't ask questions about the divorce. That was one of the things Marcus loved most about her. "This is a nice street," she said, standing in the front yard with her hands on her hips, studying the row of identical colonials that stretched in both directions. "Very orderly." "That's what I wanted," Marcus said. Mm. She didn't sound convinced. They unloaded boxes until after dark. By the time Keisha's minivan pulled out of the driveway, the street was empty and still, and Marcus stood in his new living room, surrounded by cardboard and bubble wrap and the low hum of a refrigerator that wasn't quite level. He ate a granola bar for dinner. He sat on the floor because he hadn't unpacked the furniture yet. He felt, for the first time in months, something close to peace. He should have paid more attention to what was underneath it. The next morning, Marcus met his neighbors. Not all of them, just the couple directly across the street. He was standing on his porch with a cup of coffee when their front door opened and they stepped out together, moving in that synchronized way that long married couples sometimes do, like two people operating from the same internal clock. The man was tall, maybe 60, with white hair and a posture so straight it looked almost military. The woman was shorter, close to the same age, with dark hair pulled back severely and a smile that arrived on her face just a half second too late, like a notification that takes a moment to load. They crossed the street together, unhurried, deliberate. "You must be our new neighbor," the man said, extending his hand. His grip was firm and dry and lasted exactly 1 second longer than it should have. "I'm Richard Holt. This is my wife, Carol." Marcus Webb. He shook Carol's hand too. Her fingers were cold despite the warm morning. "We've been on this street for 22 years, Richard said, looking up at Marcus's house with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. "It's a good street, quiet. People keep to themselves mostly, but we look out for each other." "That sounds perfect," Marcus said. Carol's smile widened. "We'll have to have you over for dinner sometime." "I'd like that." They said goodbye and walked back across the street with the same unhurried deliberateness with which they had come. Marcus watched them go. Richard opened their front door and held it for Carol, and just before she stepped inside, she turned and looked back at Marcus over her shoulder. She was still smiling. Marcus told himself it was a friendly smile. He went back inside and unpacked his kitchen. By the end of the first week, he had met a few more neighbors. Tom Garrett, 2 houses down, who waved from his driveway every morning at exactly 7:15 and never said anything beyond good morning. Sandra Chu across the way, who left a casserole dish on Marcus's porch with a note that said, "Welcome to Delwood," in handwriting so precise it looked printed. An older man at the end of the block, whose name Marcus never caught, who walked a small white dog every evening at dusk and always looked at the ground. It was a nice street, quiet, orderly. Everyone kept to themselves, just like Richard had said. Marcus started sleeping better than he had in years. The first small thing happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after he moved in. Marcus came home from work around 6:30 to find his front door unlocked. He stood on the porch for a moment, key in hand, trying to remember whether he had locked it that morning. He was almost certain he had. He was a meticulous person. Double checking locks was part of his routine, along with checking the stove twice and making sure his alarm was set before he got into bed. But people forget things. He told himself that. He went inside. Nothing was missing. Nothing seemed disturbed. The dead fern basket still hung by the door, still shedding its dry brown flakes. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. Almost. On the kitchen counter, there was a coffee mug he didn't recognize. White ceramic, no logo or design, sitting in the exact center of the counter, as if it had been placed there carefully. Marcus picked it up. It was clean and dry and completely ordinary. He looked at it for a long time. Then he set it in the cabinet with his other mugs and told himself he must have brought it from somewhere without remembering. He made dinner. He went to bed. The second small thing happened 4 days later. Marcus had his security camera installed, not because of the mug, he told himself, but because it was just smart to have one. A single camera above the front door, pointed at the porch and the driveway and the street beyond. He set it up on a Saturday afternoon and spent that evening scrolling through the app on his phone, learning the interface. The footage was clear, crisp night vision, a good wide angle. He could see all the way across to the Holt's house from the camera's position. At 2:17 in the morning, he saw something. He had been asleep, but a motion alert woke him. He opened the app and watched the recorded clip. The footage showed his front porch, his driveway, the empty street beyond, and in the far left edge of the frame, just barely visible, just at the boundary of the camera's reach, a figure, standing on the sidewalk in front of the Holt's house, just standing there, facing Marcus's house. The clip was 47 seconds long. For all 47 seconds, the figure didn't move. And then, in the last 3 seconds of the clip, it turned and walked away, slowly, unhurried, and was gone. Marcus couldn't make out a face. The figure was too far, and the light too low, but the posture was straight, almost military. He sat in his dark bedroom for a long time, looking at his phone. In the morning, he drove past the Holt's house on his way to work and saw Richard outside, trimming the hedges along the front walkway. Richard looked up and waved. His posture was perfect. His smile was easy and warm. Marcus waved back. He didn't say anything to Richard. What would he say? "I saw someone who might have been you standing outside at 2 in the morning?" He had no proof. It could have been anyone. It could have been a stranger walking home late. It could have been a neighbor who couldn't sleep. He reviewed the camera footage again that evening, and again the night after. No more figures. No more motion alerts. By the end of the week, he had almost convinced himself he had overreacted. And then Sandra Chu said something that changed everything. He ran into her at the mailbox on a Friday afternoon. She was pulling envelopes from her box, flipping through them with the distracted efficiency of someone who has checked their mail 1,000 times. Marcus said hello, and she smiled and asked how he was settling in. "Good," he said. "Really good. It's a nice neighborhood." "It is," she agreed. Then, almost as an afterthought, "You're sleeping okay? Adjusting to the sounds and everything?" "Yeah, actually, I've been sleeping better than I expected." She nodded, still looking at her mail. "That's good. Some people have trouble at first. The neighborhood can take some getting used to. Marcus laughed a little. What do you mean? She looked up then. Something moved across her face, quick, like a cloud shadow crossing a field. Oh, nothing. Just that it's a new place. New sounds. You know how it is. She said goodbye and went back inside. Marcus stood at the mailbox for a moment, his letters in his hand. The neighborhood can take some getting used to. It was a perfectly ordinary thing to say. He had no reason to find it strange. He found it strange anyway. Carol Holt called on a Wednesday evening to invite him to dinner that Saturday. Her voice on the phone was warm and unhurried, and she talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular. The weather, the new restaurant that had opened up on Route 9, a family of deer she'd seen in her backyard that morning, before getting to the invitation. Marcus almost said no. He stood in his kitchen with the phone to his ear and felt something in his chest that he couldn't quite name. Not fear exactly. More like the feeling you get when you're driving and you realize you've missed your turn, but you don't know exactly when it happened. He said yes, because saying no to a dinner invitation from his neighbors across the street, based on nothing more than a feeling and a camera clip that might have been anyone, seemed like the kind of thing a paranoid person would do. Marcus was not a paranoid person. Saturday arrived gray and cold. Marcus crossed the street at 6 o'clock with a bottle of red wine he'd spent too long choosing at the store. The Holt's house was lit warmly from within, every window glowing. And when Richard opened the door, before Marcus even rang the bell, like he'd been watching, Marcus told himself that was just the behavior of a gracious host and nothing else. The inside of the house was immaculate, not clean, immaculate. The kind of clean that takes sustained daily effort, where there are no stray papers or kicked off shoes or half finished drinks on the counter. Every surface was bare and dust free. The furniture was arranged with a precision that made Marcus feel like he was inside a showroom. Everything matched perfectly. The throw pillows, the curtains, the carefully placed decorative objects, as if someone had ordered the entire contents of the room from a single catalog. There were no photographs anywhere. Marcus noticed that immediately and told himself it meant nothing. Some people didn't display photographs. That was fine. Plenty of people lived without photographs on their walls. But there was something about the absence that felt intentional, scrubbed. Red wine, Richard said, examining the bottle Marcus offered with a smile. Perfect. Carol appeared from the kitchen in an apron, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Marcus, so glad you came. I hope you're hungry. I made way too much food, as always. The dinner was good. The food was genuinely excellent. A roast with vegetables, fresh bread, a salad with a dressing. Carol said she'd been making for 30 years. The wine was open and flowing. Richard told stories about the neighborhood, its history, the families who had come and gone over the 22 years he and Carol had lived there. Marcus listened and laughed in the right places and felt himself beginning to relax. And then Richard said, "The Pattersons lived in your house before you." "Oh, yeah?" Marcus said. "I think the realtor mentioned that." "Nice couple," Carol said from across the table, her voice perfectly even. "Young, maybe 30 or so." "What happened to them?" A pause. Brief, almost imperceptible. "They moved," Richard said. "Suddenly. Family matter, I think. We didn't get a chance to say a proper goodbye." "That's too bad." "It happens," Carol said and smiled. "People come and go. That's the nature of neighborhoods." Marcus nodded. He picked up his wine glass and took a sip. "Do you have their contact information?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. "I've been meaning to ask the previous owners a few questions about the house. Some things about the plumbing I wanted to clarify." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm afraid not," Richard said. "We lost touch." Carol said nothing. She was looking at her plate. Marcus smiled and changed the subject, and the dinner continued. And by the time he left at 9 o'clock with a foil covered plate of leftovers, Carol pressed into his hands, he had cataloged 7 moments during the evening where the Holt's answers had been just a fraction too smooth, just a half second too prepared, like people who had rehearsed. He found them on a Sunday afternoon. It took 2 hours of searching online, social media, public records, an old neighborhood forum he found buried in a Google search. Their names were Diane and Kevin Patterson. They had lived at his address, 14 Delwood Drive, for approximately 8 months before vacating the property 14 months ago. Their social media profiles still existed. Diane's last post was 14 months ago, a photo of a sunset captioned New Beginnings with a location tag that placed her in Savannah, Georgia. Kevin's last post was around the same time, a photo of moving boxes captioned Onward. Marcus sent them both direct messages. He didn't expect a response. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that he was a grown man sending messages to strangers because he'd had a strange feeling at a dinner party, because a figure had stood outside at 2 in the morning, because a coffee mug had appeared on his counter. The next morning, Diane Patterson responded, "Who is this? How do you know us?" He explained that he had bought their old house. He told her he had some questions if she didn't mind. He kept it casual, light. Her next response came 3 hours later. "I don't talk about that house. Please don't contact us again." He stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, "Did something happen on Delwood Drive?" She didn't respond that day or that night. At 11:43 the following morning, his phone buzzed with a message from a number he didn't recognize. A different number. Not her profile, not her account. A plain text message from an unknown contact. "Stop asking questions. Move out of that house. Don't tell anyone on the street you're leaving. Just go." Marcus sat very still. He read the message 4 times. Then he typed back, "Diane?" The response was immediate. "Please, I'm serious. Don't tell them you know. Don't change your routine. Just leave." He didn't leave. Not yet. He told himself it was because he had no real reason to, that a series of strange coincidences and cryptic text messages were not sufficient reason to abandon a mortgage and a new life. But the truth, if he was being honest with himself, was something else. He was angry. He had spent the last year of his life feeling like he had no control over anything. The divorce, the transfer, the slow erosion of the person he used to be. He was not going to be chased out of his own house by something he didn't understand. He needed to understand it first. He started with the forum. It was an old neighborhood watch forum for the Delwood Drive area, the kind of thing that had been active years ago before social media made it obsolete. Most of the posts were mundane: package thefts, loose dogs, noise complaints. But he searched by address and date range and found something buried in a thread from 6 years ago. A post from a user named Delwood_concerned. "Has anyone else noticed the pattern? 3 families have moved out of the 14 Delwood property in the last 8 years. I talked to the Garcias when they left. Maria said she felt like they were being watched. Cameras. I don't know if it's one neighbor or several, but something is wrong on this street. I've started keeping notes." The thread had 4 responses. 2 were dismissive. One was a single word: careful. The fourth was from the forum moderator, a user named RH_Delwood, who had locked the thread and posted, "Please keep posts relevant to verified community matters. Unsubstantiated claims are not appropriate for this forum. RH Richard Holt." Marcus closed the laptop and sat in the silence of his living room for a very long time. He went back through his camera footage that night. All of it, every hour of every night since installation. He had dismissed the alerts he hadn't investigated. There had been 6 of them. He watched them all. 3 were false alarms: a raccoon, a car turning around in the cul-de-sac, a delivery truck, The other three were figures, not always in front of the Holtz house, different positions each time, different hours, but the same stillness, the same deliberateness. In one clip, he could make out two figures standing together on the sidewalk in the dark, facing his house. In the last clip from 4 nights ago, one of the figures walked up to the edge of Marcus's driveway and stood there for 11 minutes before walking away. 11 minutes. Marcus pulled up his contacts and called Keisha. She answered on the second ring. Hey, what's up? I need to ask you something, he said, and I need you to not think I'm losing my mind. A beat. Okay. How much do you know about organized stalking? Keisha drove down the following weekend. She didn't tell Marcus she was coming. He hadn't asked her to, hadn't even mentioned when they'd spoken that he was frightened. But she showed up on a Saturday morning with coffee and that particular expression she wore when she had already made up her mind about something. She watched all the camera footage. She read the forum post. She read Diane Patterson's messages. Marcus, she said carefully, I think you need to take this seriously. I am taking it seriously. No, I mean, I think you need to leave. He shook his head. I'm not leaving without understanding what's happening. That's exactly what someone in a thriller says before things get bad. Despite everything, he almost smiled. They spent the afternoon going through everything he'd found, building a picture of it. Keisha was meticulous. She worked in healthcare administration and had a mind that organized information the way other people organized closets. By evening, they had a timeline on his laptop, a list of names, a sequence of events. 3 families in 8 years, all of whom had left suddenly. The forum post, locked immediately by Richard Holt. Sandra Chu's careful edged comment about the neighborhood, taking getting used to. The figures in the night, the unlocked door, the mug. The mug bothers me most, Keisha said. Me too. Someone was inside your house. I know. Marcus, that's not neighborhood drama. That's trespassing. That's. She stopped. Do you have new locks? He didn't. He ordered them that night, along with a set of additional interior cameras, and Keisha stayed until Monday morning and helped him install all of it. Before she left, standing in the driveway with her keys in her hand, she looked across the street at the Holtz house. The curtains in the front window shifted slightly. Don't let them know you know, she said quietly, echoing Diane Patterson's words exactly, though she didn't know that. Whatever you're going to do it careful. She drove away. Marcus went back inside. He stood at his front window and looked across at the Holtz. The curtains were still now. He picked up his phone and called the non-emergency police line and reported what he had. The footage, the entry, all of it. The officer on the phone was polite and professional and non-committal. He said someone would follow up. Marcus thanked him and hung up and felt no relief whatsoever. 3 nights later, at 1:48 in the morning, every one of Marcus's new cameras triggered simultaneously. He was awake. He hadn't been sleeping well. He grabbed his phone and opened the app and saw all 4 feeds at once. Front door, back door, driveway, backyard. Front door, Richard Holt, standing on the porch, his hand reaching for the door handle. Back door, Carol Holt, standing in the backyard, looking up at the house. Driveway, empty. Backyard secondary angle. 2 other figures he didn't recognize, standing at the fence line. Marcus did not panic. He felt something happen inside him that was the opposite of panic. A terrible clarity, cold and sharp. Like a window being cleaned so thoroughly, you can suddenly see exactly what's outside. He called 911. He spoke quietly and clearly. He gave his address. He said there were people attempting to enter his home. He stayed on the line. He watched the front door handle turn. The lock held. He heard Richard's voice, muffled through the door, strangely conversational. Marcus, we just want to talk. Marcus said nothing. He watched the feeds. He stayed on the phone. It took the police 7 minutes to arrive. In those 7 minutes, Marcus did not move from his position at the center of his living room, equidistant from every wall, every door, every window. He watched the feeds. Richard stood at the front door for 4 of those minutes, trying the handle periodically, speaking in that same calm, conversational tone. When the police lights appeared at the end of the street, all four figures moved quickly. By the time the officers knocked on Marcus's door, the Holtz house was dark and still, and when one officer crossed the street and knocked on their door, it was Richard who answered, in a robe, rubbing his eyes, performing bewildered concern so smoothly it should have been frightening. But Marcus had the footage, all of it, time stamped, undeniable. Marcus moved out of 14 Delwood Drive 8 days later, not because they won, because he chose to. The investigation that followed was slow and complicated and unsatisfying in the way that real things often are. Not a clean resolution, but a process. Richard and Carol Holt were questioned. Two other residents of Delwood Drive were questioned. The investigation connected the Holts to the departures of three previous families, to a pattern of harassment so sustained and methodical, it had required the cooperation of multiple neighbors. Why? That was the question Marcus got asked most often later when he told the story. He never had a clean answer. The investigators found evidence of a fixation. The previous owners had filed a noise complaint against the Holts years ago, a small thing, easily forgotten, but something that had apparently calcified into something else entirely in Richard Holt's mind, something that required control, required that the house across the street remain under his oversight, required the ongoing collective effort of a small group of neighbors who had been recruited into Richard's worldview over 22 years, slowly, one by one, organized, methodical, patient, the kind of thing that works right up until someone doesn't leave. Marcus bought a condo on the other side of the city, third floor, one entrance, a doorman. He installed cameras anyway. He slept well most nights. Keisha called every Sunday. She always asked, at the end of their calls, "You doing okay over there?" He always said yes. Most of the time, he meant it. The dead fern basket he had thrown away the morning he left. It sat in the trash at the curb as the moving truck pulled away. He watched it in the rearview mirror until he turned the corner and couldn't see Delwood Drive anymore. He didn't look back after that.